Good evening, everyone. If you could start taking your seats, we'll get started with the closing ceremony in just a few moments. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic couple days at the Global Landscapes Forum. I'm sure we're all thinking landscapes right now. After the forum, please check back on our website, landscapes.org, for photos, videos, blogs, and other information about the events. We're also producing an outcome statement drawing from key messages from across all the sessions, and the goal is to realize climate and development goals through sustainable landscapes. We had over 40 sessions from a variety of different key areas and topics. And now I would like to call on stage Achim Steiner, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UNEP, to give some closing remarks on behalf of the coordinating partners.
Oops, there. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon or also good morning to some parts of the world, because this closing session is being webcast live. And as Olivia just said, to those of you who are somewhere in the world perhaps watching right now, let me tell you that this forum has been remarkable, extraordinary, but you have not missed the opportunity to follow it, because many of its sessions have been recorded and will be on the website. And I think whether you are a practitioner, a university professor, a minister, a forester, a farmer, do take a look at some of these sessions. Just my own experience in attending a few today is that this has been one of the more remarkable fora in which often the audience was even better qualified than the panelists, and that doesn't happen very often. But that's not to say that the panelists weren't incredibly well qualified. No, it's just the audience. Just to make sure I don't get into trouble with my fellow panelists. Delivered extraordinary insight. And I want to begin by saying that I have been invited to address you on behalf of the coordinating partners. And I simply wish to note that a forum such as this, and if I understand correctly, it could be one, if not the largest forum that is happening alongside this conference here in Paris, the COP, has drawn together people from different disciplines and sectors. And part of what made the coordinating partners commit to working together was this notion that we needed to move beyond sector perspectives. Some people shy away from complexity, but complexity is actually not only the new reality, it has been there for a long time, but perhaps the new realization that in a world of 7 billion people, with all the resource pressures, demands, lack of public policy progress at local, national, international level on certain key things, complexity is becoming, if you want, the defining arena within which we need to move. What used to be a world in which you could exploit a resource and move on, in which a kind of mining of natural resources was, if you wish, the order of the day, we today have to manage a very different production system. So one big step that this forum took some years ago, and I want to recognize in particular the leadership also of C4 in having brought this about, but many others who have begun to create this narrative, is that we move beyond sector and start thinking in terms of place. A place where people live, a place where a farmer produces, a place where commodities coming out of the agriculture and forestry sectors are traded, whether at the local market, the global market, where the knowledge that is associated with disciplines, be they the scientific disciplines, be they the social sciences, are in a sense forced to converge in order to provide a different understanding of how we can manage that complexity. A landscape approach encapsulated in this forum that has now matured into really quite a remarkable event, coming alongside the Climate Change Conference of the Parties, has not only in its own right produced a different narrative and conversation, but by holding it in the context of these climate conferences, has also enabled an audience to partake in the deliberations that otherwise would be very difficult to assemble. And I think, again, we need to be grateful for the opportunity that this has provided to us, but also to the broader climate community, because the transitions that are being discussed a few kilometers down the road in Le Bourget are as yet very much focused on issues that relate to, yes, decarbonization, clean technologies, and despite our very best efforts, the ecological infrastructure of this planet, agriculture and forestry as integral parts of being able and enabling the world to address this challenge are not yet sufficiently recognized. In part, that is the task that the Forum has taken on, and through the Forum, all of you individually, wherever you work, and by contributing to the state of knowledge that we are able to present here. I do have to note that, and I hope this is something that all of you have shared, that we need to give particular credit to those of you who have arranged these sessions and indeed the program as a whole. As participants, you have benefited from it as much as you have contributed to the synthesis of knowledge and also the outlook with which we will continue to make that part of the world that we capture in that notion of landscape a much more prominent part in the understanding of how it, yes, contributes to global warming through certain decisions and pathways, but actually also represents one of the most significant opportunities for addressing the challenge of climate change, and perhaps for this elusive notion to some that there are a great deal of win-wins to be found in bringing the conversation about climate change, about food security, about farming, about forestry, and about how we manage our ecosystems into a whole. The theory of change that is emerging through this landscape forum focused very much in this notion of drawing the threads together around this concept of the place in which we manage resources and also practice production will change, I think, not only the way our different sectors look at the future, but it will also hopefully change the way that a global climate process begins to translate into visions and perspectives for the rest of the world. Let me once again thank all of you for having contributed to this, thank the organizers, and also in particular our colleagues at C4, but many of our teams who are in the corridors in the background have made these extraordinary 2 days possible. It's been a privilege to be here amongst you, and I think for all of us in the coordinating team of organizations, your presence here and the quality of discussions is the best validation that you could have given. Thank you.
Thank you, Achim, for your opening address. I would now like to call on stage Selena Abraham, Head of the International Processes Commission of the International Forestry Students Association and Youth in Landscapes Initiative representative.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Olivia. My name is Salina Mulugeta Abraha. I'm Eritrean by heritage, I'm Dutch by birth, and I'm American by schooling. So I hope that my thoughts today are reflective or give some insight into the youth perspective. I'm passionate about landscapes because through this approach, we choose to transcend borders. I'm coming to speak to you on behalf of the youth, to share with you what we envision for the future, what we've accomplished, and what we have to offer. I was lucky enough to participate in the Youth in Landscapes initiative here at the GLF this year. This initiative is organized by IFSA, the International Forestry Students Association, YPART, the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, and Gaia, the Global Agroecology Alliance, which together represents over 15,000 young people who are working and studying in landscapes. This past week, I've been able to spend 4 days in workshops with 50 incredible young people. And they have shared with me their challenges in working with their landscapes. And I've been inspired by them, I've been encouraged by them, and we've really supported each other in the work that we've been doing here. Through the workshops, we were able to practice being comfortable with being uncomfortable, seeking consensus even when it seemed impossible, and learning skills that helped us to meaningfully engage at the GLF. So throughout this week, we worked in teams to develop solutions to 5 real-world land use challenges. We were mentored by UNEP, Wageningen University, Livelihoods Venture, the CGIAR research program on land, water, and ecosystems, as well as C4. And I want to share some of these solutions with you. One group came up with an exchange program between smallholder farmers that empowers them to form cooperatives and share resources, such as storage, facilities, and centralized distribution centers. Another designed a self-assessment tool where you can enter your current knowledge and skills, and it will generate a customized curriculum to fill the gaps in your landscape knowledge. Other teams want to prototype various mapping and data collection tools to tackle challenges around REDD+ social safeguards, landscape restoration, and measuring progress towards SDGs. To us, this wasn't just an exercise, it wasn't just a game. These could be real-world solutions to real-world challenges. So, I want to ask from you 2 things. The first is to concretely integrate youth into the work that you do and the solutions we have to offer into your organizations. The second is to support our Youth in Landscapes initiative so that we can continue to grow and enable youth so that we can become the leaders that we will have to be in the world. Many of us struggle to get here, and in order to have a truly inclusive representation of youth around the world, we will need your support. I'm asking you to consider youth like you consider regional diversity. Consider youth like we consider race and ethnicity. Consider youth like you consider gender. And I'm asking you to value youth in the same way we are now valuing interdisciplinarity. We cannot make the critical progress that we truly need without an inclusive and intergenerational effort. To finish up, I would like everyone under 30 who is in this room to stand. These here, yeah, you can stay standing. These are not just the people who will be alive and working in 2050 and 2055. Just saying. These people are also here right now. We're bringing our ideas, our energy, our enthusiasm, and our hope. And what we're just asking from you is to talk to us. To ask us what we're passionate about. Ask us what challenges we're facing in our current landscapes. Let's continue to generate these discussions so we can make a truly collective step forward. So, we already know that we need you. We need your wisdom, your guidance, your investment. But I'm here to tell you, you may not know it, but you also need us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena, for such an inspiring speech. Now I would like to call on stage Paul Delduc, Director General of Planning, Housing and Nature, French Minister for Ecology, Sustainable Development and Energy.
Merci. Messieurs les ministres.
Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I will ask you to apologize, Mrs. Ségolène Royal, Minister for Ecology and Sustainable Development, who could not make it with you, but shares your work here. And as I'm in charge, of architecture, I want to mention that for us young people, it goes till the age of 40, but we can have a discussion about it. So now, this forum and its contribution to climate negotiations are crucial. You all know, like me, that 24% of greenhouse gases come from agricultural activities. And of course, this must be at the heart of these negotiations. Like Achim Steiner said, this is a crucial debate. Forestry and farming are at the heart of the transition of rural territories towards resilience and low carbon emission. All these synergies can only be found through landscape approaches. We are fully aware of that in France, and we are willing to promote integrated conservation strategies to promote natural resources without losing sight of our main objective, which is to ensure the well-being of all populations. This forum has brought together many different stakeholders, NGOs, representatives from private sectors, and this in a non-formal forum which allows people to be free in the way they express themselves. More than 10,000 people came here at different times. Your forum and the impetus it generated is a concrete example of the mindset that around which COP21 was organized in Paris, because our desire was to get civil society involved in fighting against against global warming. And this forum showed that there are means to fight against deforestation and in favor of farming. France is very happy with regards to the measures that was taken when we talk about the policies to fight against deforestation. Billions will be dedicated to that, and we have a true commitment from various players in the private sector. These commitments help develop traceability, develop the targets with targeting those that have the highest impact, so, palm oil, cocoa, etc. The Minister for Ecology in our country, in France, wants to support this transformation of the landscape. And at French level, we've initiated a thinking process about public purchases to see how we can subsource from zero deforestation sources. And at European level, we want to take part in a thinking process at European level to reduce deforestation. And at international level, the Minister is very happy with the International Declaration on Protected Areas that brings together various countries in South America and in the Caribbean region. We are part of it through French Guiana, and this initiative brings together various territories having to face the same challenges. France will make concrete proposals to face the process. France is particularly active because it has a tropical forest on its own territory, one being quite large in French Guiana. France also has long-lasting cooperation with all countries in the Congo area. In our territory, France also implements integrated solutions to support rural landscapes in metropolitan France and support them to shift towards lean management of natural resources. And that's the model of regional natural parks, which is close to another model that you've probably heard about, which was supported by Japan during the Convention on Biological Diversity, and that's the Satayama Initiative. Regional parks are organized around sustainable development, and they want to protect the natural heritage. In France, we have 51 regional parks covering 15% of the French French territory. I want to thank you for these very fruitful exchanges you had over these 2 days. All efforts to make this conference on climate a success are welcome, and your active contribution was mostly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I'm now delighted to welcome the Minister for the Environment of Australia, Greg Hunt.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And I have to confess that when Selena asked all those under 30 to stand, I didn't stand. And Achim, it's precisely because of that, because so many people in this room did stand, that when you made your comment about the audience being better qualified than the panellists, I couldn't agree more. And the reason why is simple, because Olivia and Selena and all of those young people under 30 years of age, this is your forum. More than that, the magnificent wetlands of Kakadu are your common heritage in Australia. The extraordinary reefs of Belize are your common heritage. And the most significant environmental asset in the world, the rainforests of the Amazon, are your common asset. All, in their own way, though, are under challenge. But there is a battle, in a sense, between three great colours, between brown, being the colour of the emissions from industrial activity that go up, of green, being the colour of the landscapes which bring emissions down, and blue, being the colour of the oceans and the blue carbon which offers so much potential both for reducing emissions and enhancing the great biodiversity of the oceans. The good news is that in the last few weeks we have seen success in reducing the brown emissions. In Dubai, the Montreal Protocol decision was to save 90 billion tonnes of emissions between now and 2050. Only 2 nights ago at Le Bourget, the Conference of the Parties passed the 2020 Kyoto Protocol 2 decision, which will see a huge volume of further emissions saved. And I believe, and I really believe, that by Friday of this week, maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday, there will be a Paris Agreement at COP21. But that's our task. Your task is ongoing, and that is in terms of colours. And so as we go forward, there are 2 great initiatives which come from this Global Landscapes Forum. In terms of the green, there is a global rainforest recovery initiative aiming to bring together the nations of the world, the organisations of the world and the companies of the world to protect and regenerate the great rainforests, and you must be the custodians of that going forward. And there is also a global blue carbon partnership to protect our mangroves, to protect our seagrass, to protect our salt marshes, and to provide habitat for our fish and our sea life to breed and to evolve. And you are the custodians of those great initiatives going forward. This week, I believe we will succeed. This is our week, but going forwards, the green and the blue are your heritage. You will not fail us, of that I am sure. But by Friday night, I believe, I hope and I expect that we will not fail you. Thank you for your faith.
Thank you, Greg. Those were all of our speakers for the beginning. Now, Achim will moderate the panel. We have a distinguished panel of speakers for this closing plenary. So we have Minister Luis Felipe Arauz, the Minister of Agriculture of Costa Rica. Abdon Nababan, Secretary General for the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. Mark Burroughs, Managing Director and Vice Chairman of Global Investment Banking Credit Suisse. And Juliana Santiago, Head of the Amazon Fund at the Brazilian Development Bank. So, Achim, you now have the floor.
I know, I've got something around my head. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing that just struck me when Selena spoke, and on my original program, there was actually a youth representative. Now, I know that Juliana, you stood up when it was under 30. But let me just do the following, because I think sometimes a moderator does have a certain degree of latitude. Since, Selena, you put the challenge out, let me invite you back on this podium, because I think you belong here. So I hope you are still here. I hope Olivia can organize another chair. For the moment, let me just stand. Come and join us here. No, please, have a seat. Nice to meet you. Well done. I will actually not say a lot. I think the best thing we can do right now is simply to hand to our panel the floor, say to them two things. One, share with us what you came here to say, but do it briefly. And secondly, provide us with a conclusion from what you saw here, from your very own professional life perspective. And I think that would make this last round truly meaningful. Minister, if I may begin with you and invite you to either speak from here or to speak from the podium, whichever you feel more comfortable. The floor is yours, please. I'm glad you're still here, but you might have escaped.
Thank you. The most challenging thing is to be brief, but I'll do my best. And also, in the topic of youth, I would like to say that when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the environment, we talk about economics, we talk about social justice, but especially in agriculture, we cannot talk about sustainable agriculture if we don't have farmers. So we have an aging population of farmers. We need to, for the younger generations, to become in love with agriculture again, if we really want our agriculture to be sustainable. But that is not going to happen if agriculture does not address the challenge of food security and production. That is not going to happen if agriculture continues to reproduce poverty around the world. So we need to address those challenges without compromising our environment. We need to address food security, production, in the face of climate change, and the threefold relationship that agriculture has with the environment. Being agriculture a victim of climate change, but also a contributor to climate change, and also provides opportunities to mitigate climate change. But that needs different approaches. We cannot continue doing business as usual. We need more agroecological approaches to understand the complex relationships that occur in a landscape in order to be able to have a really sustainable agriculture within the landscape framework. So we need better knowledge management. We need better research, better extension, and better knowledge to bring to the field this knowledge. So we need to move from agriculture that is intensive in inputs to an agriculture that is intensive in knowledge, and that's the only way that the younger generation is going to fall in love with agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to see a minister explain agriculture in terms of falling in love, isn't it? So, ladies and gentlemen, the world also fell in love with Costa Rica many years ago, because I think it deserves a special round of applause, because the things we are discussing here today in this forum in many ways had their origins also in the visionary development discourse that emanated from Costa Rica. So I think it deserves a special applause. Next on the podium, Juliana, you have the floor. Please take us forward and back to what you saw in the last 2 days.
Thank you, Achim, and thank you for the Global Landscape Forum for the invitation and for the privilege to be to share the podium with this distinguished panelists, and also, as you said, to the distinguished audience that we had and we could see during the all discussions forums that we could participate. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past years, we could observe a significant reduction of deforestation rates in the Amazon region. Deforestation rates has reduced by 80%. To maintain this rate and to go further and reduce more, even more efforts need to be done. The turning point in Brazil's efforts to curb deforestation was the implementation of the National Strategic Plan to prevent and control deforestation in the Amazon region. This policy was built as a pact and joint efforts between the federal government ministries, the Amazonian states, civil society, and the scientific community. And this might be one of the main reasons for the results we have seen. In this context of deforestation reduction, the Brazilian government and society created the Amazon Fund, a pioneering initiative to reward the results obtained by Brazil in REDD+, and which aims to support the implementation of further actions to reduce deforestation and emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. The Amazon Fund was formally established in 2008, having the government of Norway as its first donor, and followed by the government of Germany. To date, the fund has donations to the tune of $1 billion and a portfolio of 77 projects in the total amount of more than $500 million. Over these past 7 years of operation, the fund has shown that it's possible to build a significant portfolio of projects that includes a wide range of activities and institutions with operations in the Amazon region, to ensure a robust and transparent process of selecting projects with special attention to the rights of traditional and indigenous populations, to prioritize the most effective actions to confront the deforestation vectors, and to develop efficient mechanisms of resource distribution to communities and smaller institutions through other partners' organizations. The existence of the fund has helped to consolidate support for forest protection, raise the profile, and improve the governance of relevant environmental institutions, and also provided adequate resources to initiatives that were underfunded or not funded at all. The Amazon Fund has also supported capacity building to governmental institutions and civil society that works in the Amazon region. Likewise, it can be said that the Amazon Fund has raised further awareness of the Brazilian Development Bank, the manager of the fund, to the enormous challenge of reconciling the development agenda with forest conservation. The efforts to reduce deforestation must also be aligned with fostering a sustainable and more efficient use of the land so that rural economic growth contributes to the protection of the environment instead of being one of the deforestation drivers. In the long term, sustainable forestry that integrates the traditional and indigenous populations, the private and institutional markets, is indispensable if we are to succeed in the endeavor of protecting the planet's forests. The importance of reducing deforestation goes beyond the climate agenda and the reduction of the systemic economic risk associated with rising global temperatures. Because reducing deforestation also means sustainable development, with social inclusion and respect for other forms of life that share this planet with us. Brazil has delivered a relevant reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by curbing deforestation. Other countries are also concerned with the rising of global temperatures and are contributing with financial and technical resources. The benefits for reducing the deforestation are global. The resources that have been applied so far have managed to reduce deforestation, but have not succeeded yet in establishing a new economic model that coexists with the biggest tropical forest in the world. On behalf of the Brazilian Development Bank and the Amazon Fund, we are proud to be part of this global process. And we are optimistic that based on the recent announcements of new financial commitments to forests that some countries made last week, plus further mobilization of other rich and developing tropical forest countries, we can achieve even better results. The motto of the Amazon Fund states, "Brazil protects it, the world supports it, everybody wins." Inspired by Selena, I hope that the future history books might say something like, "Some countries and people has joined efforts to protect the planet to the future generation." Thank you.
Juliana, let me just also note, not only has Brazil joined, Brazil truly has taken a leadership role in turning what was an orthodoxy of 30 to 40 years about the future of the Amazon into a shining example of what it is to act in the national interest and for the common good, and also to do one of the most significant deviations from business as usual of any country in the world over the last 10 years in reducing deforestation. It is often not recognized and not known, and I also want to simply echo something I learned this morning, that as a result of this complex forest code, and let's be honest, it was sometimes an ugly discussion, a very confrontational discussion, Brazil is today using also fiscal policy instruments, the development bank instruments, to reward, but also to punish those who do not follow this new code. Other countries have a great deal to learn from that experience, and we wish you luck with implementing it. Thank you for being here today. Now, it gives me particular pleasure, as a mere Under-Secretary General, to welcome Abdon, Secretary General, not only in his home country and amongst his people, but also to bring the perspective of indigenous peoples to our closing panel this afternoon. Abdon, you have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We are now in a defining moment, a moment when what is at stake is the very survival of our Earth. And our economies are also suffering, and the lives of billions of people threatened. This is the climate change moment. These are the words I spoke at the global meeting at the World Bank headquarters in September 2008. What progress we made in the past 7 years. In preparation of the closings of this prestigious event, the speaker have been provided by guiding questions by the organizer. One of the statements reads that question of how land is used are directly linked to question of who used the land. Question of how land is used are directly linked to a questions of who used that land. This is a very important statement. There is a beauty in its simplicity. Here today, we presented a scientific analysis that reveals that much of the world's carbon is found within indigenous peoples' territory today. In this building. This comes as a no surprise to those familiar with how most local communities manage their territories and landscapes. We have the greatest motivations to maintain ecosystem integrity, and we have the traditional knowledge to do so. Question of how the land is used are directly linked to question of who uses that land. But it's regrettable that not all indigenous land are currently used by indigenous peoples. Millions of hectares have been grabbed, and millions more are threatened by industrial agriculture, forestry, and mining. The conversion of biological diverse, carbon-rich landscape and the destruction of life-sustaining watershed have brought suffering to our peoples and to the local and the global environment. In the past 2 months, forest and peatlands fires in Indonesia have released huge amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. Several million Indonesians have suffered severe health effects. And we indigenous peoples believe we have a great responsibility as we must play a central role in global effort to avert a climate disaster. But how can we do this unless our collective rights are recognized and our effort to manage our lands and our forests are supported? Ladies and gentlemen, we are all here at COP21 with the same objective, to slow climate change and the emissions that are fueling it. The world has never had such strong evidence of the role of indigenous peoples in conserving the forest that represent the one existing solutions to climate change. Worldwide, at least 20% of the carbon in the tropical forest is on indigenous land. Yet, we lack right to most of those territories. For those who don't see the link between indigenous territorial and land rights and climate change, you should know that we are the best guardians of the forest. But to continue to do this job, we need for the world to recognize our right as a part of any agreement on climate change. And our national government must make this happen if they are serious about reducing emission. Without us, the forest will be disappear. Without the forest, we will disappear along with our food, our water, our lives, and the essence of what makes us human. Without the forest and the peoples who protect them, we will fail in our goal to save the planet from rapidly evolving climate that puts humanity itself at risk. Given that scientific gathering serves to inform the negotiating process, I want to take this opportunity to insist that the main text of agreement fully incorporate human rights, particularly those of indigenous peoples, as an operational strategy for combating climate change. You cannot protect the forest from Paris, Oslo, from New York, from London. Only those us who are protecting it already can continue to do so. At this 11 hours from now, we must take action to protect the indigenous peoples who protect the forest. This is not about our lives alone. It is about all our lives and those of all other species with which we share this planet. In recognition of our common humanity and our common battle to save our planet, I ask you all to take a few moments of silence, breathe deeply. Can you hear the earth crying? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Abdon, thank you very much for making us listen to you, but also the earth. Let me also say that I wonder if this forum in part has made that reality of indigenous peoples become much more integral to this agenda that is evolving and the narrative that is evolving internationally, because we have shifted from these sectoral perspectives which often in the GDP define narrative of importance in an economy, made indigenous people's contributions invisible. And by having chosen a landscape approach, by having chosen a place, I wonder whether by accident or by design, that actually is one of the calls that indigenous peoples have made for a long time when we look at resources. So again, thank you for being here today and for sharing that perspective and view also with us. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite Mark Burroughs, who is amongst those people who can manage to present complexity in enormous simplicity. He's also a banker, but he is actually much more than that. And Mark, I hope you will give us a flavor of that outlook that you can bring to this discussion and have brought for some time now.
Thank you very much, Achim. This is a very hard act to follow, and you've done this to me before, Achim. I'm always the last speaker with all the. But I just wanted to really throw away some of my notes about the complexities of finance, and I just wanted to just flip through them and bring you a sense of optimism and hope, because whilst certain people may represent the youth here, I am certainly the oldest investment banker you will see on the podium. And one of the great things of being here, it's very rare for an investment banker to be clapped. So thank you for that. But I have a central point that is really important to every single person in this room with this sense of optimism, that today's financial system will not deliver, and this is terribly important, adequate finance for sustainable development. And all this is despite historically low interest rates and a growing surplus of capital. And this is just so fundamental. And as Christiana said, where capital goes over the next 15 years is where is going to decide where we are able to address climate change and what kind of a century we are going to have. It's that fundamental. Now, I was going to talk to you about the past in finance and the excesses that led to 27 and 28 and the crisis then. But basically that was all about, I think, captured by someone called Mahatma Gandhi. And remember the excesses. And he made a wonderful comment. I think it sums up that whole period. Speed is irrelevant if you're going in the wrong direction. And that was what was happening. We were going in the wrong direction. So the second point is that we are, this earth is for our ancestors, but it's also for our children. As the Indians said in North America and the Indigenous people in Australia said, we are here for those that follow us. Now, the thing that is happening at the moment, right now, is that there are a whole wave of new financial instruments coming to play. The importance of me being here is not because I know Achim Steiner, it's because without me and the people that I represent, however unpalatable it may be to those of you that have to deal with the minute issues of landscape in the forests and lack of access to money, the people that I represent are the people that will ultimately make the difference. And it's really important to understand that the most critically acclaimed reports in terms of the leverage that's needed puts the finance sector, the global finance sector, as needing to provide 20 times all that is provided by governments, NGOs, and other philanthropic people. So the multiplier effect is enormous. And this is not a problem, because what's happening is that we are starting to value natural capital. It's very emerging, but we are starting to value natural capital. That is what has led to a thing called conservation finance. That is what has led to this whole new generation of jargon, which is impact investing. And impact investing shouldn't just be seen as investment banks doing an amalgamation of green bonds. It should be investment banks doing impact investing for the least off in society to assist them in terms of what they are doing. So we need to get that as a trickle-down effect. But we've got conservation finance, we've got green bonds. I say to people that ask me, well, what is a green bond, Mark? And Sean Kidney, who happens to also come from the southern part of the world, who is the father of green bond movement, is quite irritated by this, because I say a green bond is nothing more than an accelerated infrastructure investment, debt instrument for large companies, and that's what it is. So I think what we need to do in the next 5 years is as well as creating a robust and highly attenuated green bond market, what we should be doing is greening the debt market. That is what we should be doing. Now, in terms of the future, our knowledge of the natural environment has now evolved to a point where the facts have changed. A consequence is that the natural environment is increasingly becoming a significant investment parameter, and this is real. Not just because of the underlying risks and opportunities as expounded by Carney and Achim and others, but because of a new wave of associated financial policies, regulations and standards. And whilst there are fragmented conversations taking place at the margins of finance and sustainable development in the economic north, that's here, a quiet revolution is taking place in the emerging economies that has the potential to radically change the financial playing field and the financial rules of the game. And I think that the thing that I've heard very little of over the COP since I've been here, which I think is, and I have been involved in the G20 from an Australian representative in the past, but I think the most significant thing that has come out, which aligns itself with what is being done in the COP, if I may say so, Achim, and what we're talking about here, is the announcement by China that green finance will be on the G20 finance track for the first time. This is the first new work stream that has come into the G20 for 4 years. And the Chinese will lead this in concurrence with the People's Bank of China and the Bank of England. That is enormously significant, and it's big news. And when you look at Brazil and South Africa, the introduction of progressive financial regulation governing stock exchange and pension funds, the leadership you're seeing in Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Indonesia, the old world is hesitant about change. And when I looked through the list of attendees at the COP, I was embarrassed to find that I was amongst, if the oldest, but I was certainly amongst the very few. And we need to engage with these people. We need to engage with the Old West. But my view is that the Old West will be trumped by the emerging countries in terms of how they deal with sustainable development. Because remember, for a lot of countries like Kenya, sustainable development and finance is the very essence of their livelihoods and their economies. Nothing is more important. Now, I just wanted to leave you with one sort of statement that I hope, if I'm invited back next year, it will be reality. My holy grail in terms of landscape, finance, and sustainable development is to have a bond, $1 billion bond, that either deals with restoration and protection of the barrier reef, restoration and protection of the peatlands in Indonesia, but something that is a debt instrument that is guaranteed by the centrality of the ecosystem itself. Now, to me, there is nothing different between a unique ecosystem and the very nature of sovereign debt. And if you think about it, I'm sure you'd agree with my premise. So I would hope that in the next year, as this idea permeates among these Western institutions, which is where the money is, that we can come here in a year's time and say this is a change. But at the same time, when we come here again next year, we'll talk about the development of conservation finance. We'll talk about the development of greening the bond market. We'll talk about leveraging the debt market into providing the sorts of money that are needed by everybody who's represented in this world. Now, I thought about, there have been a lot of quotes floating around the COP, and it's pretty hard to be competitive. But when I think about what's been said, I luckily picked on one famous French writer, Victor Hugo. And you think about this quote, it sums up everything that I think this is all about. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Thank you very much.
Well, Mark, I think you may have just brought history of literature in France together with contemporary future of climate change, because this may very well be the motto of Paris COP21. So let's hope for that, and thank you for being with us. Celine, I let the aged, the infirm, and otherwise go before you, but now is your chance to give us, and I don't want to put undue pressure on you, but take us through one last iteration of what it is that you will take away from here, and those of you who have worked together, including with some of the things you've heard just now. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be back. And I think what I want to share with you all today has to do with acknowledgement and stories. So for us youth, we found a way to really recognize and honor each other, to acknowledge each other's perspectives and stories. And it's one thing that I learned this past week. We were in a workshop and we were asked the question, what is your greatest, or what does a challenge mean to you? And we had to go and find a picture and come back and describe what a challenge meant to us. And my partner was Guillermo from Peru. And he, along with another person, created an NGO, and he was talking about, it was a picture of a farmer, his hands holding tomatoes. And how when he explained what a challenge meant to him, I was really amazed and touched, and I also realized that I think that it's reflective of how youth think. When you ask us, what is our challenge? What does a challenge mean to us? He talked about many acres of land, farmers that live within it, a whole community, and the struggle of figuring out how to get water. The rainy season is coming. It's really important for food security, and you talked about agriculture and engaging youth, and that was a challenge to him. And I find it incredible that when you ask us that, our challenges aren't personal. Our challenges are connected to the challenges of many other people. And I think that's the context of the world that we've grown up in. It's really deviated from our personal aspirations or the things that we want to do for ourselves and our families. It has to do with the collective. And we found ways to acknowledge each other. We've created IFSA, YPARD, Gaia, to be able to share stories, to share resources, to empower each other, to encourage each other. And I just want to thank you today for acknowledging us, because this is a huge step. And to see the youth in our stories and our voice being heard and acknowledged and integrated on this stage today is beautiful. And I know I'm probably speaking, probably this time for all of us, to say that we're really thankful and we're ready. We've been in discussions with each other for a long time. We've found ways in the past week to really understand what collaboration means, which is arguing sometimes and disagreeing and finally coming to a solution or a proposal that is reflective of many different perspectives and many different ideas and contexts. And I just want to thank you, and I want to say that the youth are ready for your engagement, and come to us and ask us questions, and trust me, we are up for it.
Challenge. So there you have it, colleagues, a place in which you can fall in love, in which you can invest money, turn problems into debt that turn green, places in which we hear, in the silence of a hall, also the cries of the earth, but also bold new policies. And I want to say, it has been nice to have you here this afternoon to take the challenge of having made youth audible and visible, and I think have made it part of this place that this forum has come to occupy. So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our wonderful panel. Thank you. Now, I have one last task to do, and I want to say that I'm not quite sure why I was given the privilege of moderating this panel, because really there is somebody in this room who should have been up here. But it says a lot about him, the institution he stands for, that has played such a crucial role in bringing us together not only here, but also in previous years. I'm speaking about Peter Holmgren, the Director General of CIFOR. Peter, it is now my honor and great pleasure to invite you to the podium and to close this meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Achim. There's really only one thing left to do, and that is to close this year's Global Landscapes Forum. But I'd like to do that by reflecting a little bit of the past and maybe of the future as well. It's only 3 years since we started the Global Landscapes Forum, and for those of you that were involved at that time, this was in Warsaw, you remember that it was not easy. There was a great deal of mutual suspicion between the forestry crowd who had done the Forest Day and the agriculture crowd who had done the Agriculture Day. But we did it anyway, and you could see already in Warsaw that the forestry crowd, they kind of looked at the agriculture sessions, and the agriculture people, they looked at the forestry sessions. It was beginning to integrate. Then that continued in Lima. Integration happened, a lot more discussion, and we moved on to Paris, and it's been fantastic here. We have new discipline sectors coming into the forum: energy, water, law, finance. And I think we're now truly looking at a landscapes forum that is looking across those different disciplines sectors, values that we need to do. Somebody said that COP had 150 high-level heads of state. I would say that we've had 3,000 level-headed minds of high state. And now, thinking about the future, GLF 21 will be in year 2033, if I calculate correct. Some of us will still be around, maybe. What do we need to think about for taking on this journey into the future? And as we evaluate this forum, I think there are 4 things that I would highlight. The first one is, are we keeping the high ground of the thinking behind the landscape approach? And I think we are. I talked about values in the opening, and I think we're really broadening and taking the perspective that this is about sustainable development at large, and it's about values that go way beyond Marx's values that he talks about all the time. Finance is important, but there are many other values that go into the landscape as well. So yes, on that first point, I think we are keeping to that higher ground, and we are speaking with more and more authority about the landscape approach. The second point is, are we impacting ourselves? In the sense, do we as individuals change through this process? And I think we do. I think all of us are learning as we go. We are learning, getting new inputs from different disciplines that we hadn't heard about. And we're putting things together. We are making up our own minds about this and improving our own understanding and thinking about landscapes. So that works. Thirdly, are our organizations that we represent also changing in this direction? And I think so too. I think all of the organizations we represent are learning from this process, putting it into context for their specific mandates. At CIFOR, we're doing it from a forestry perspective, and all of you represent other types of organizations. And I think we're all building this thinking into our fabric. The fourth point, however, is one area where I think we need to consider a little bit more. And that is, are we having an impact on the ground? Are we taking all this fantastic knowledge, thinking, experience, dialogue into actual change on the ground? And I guess the best answer to that is we don't really know. I think we should look at that side of things. I think we should, first of all, understand better what impact we have. But secondly, I think we should probably, as we design future landscapes forum, specifically look at how can we improve actual impact on the ground and not, and thereby improve the whole setting and the whole way of moving forward with the forum. I think that's really essential. So that's what we are going to dive into after the Christmas breaks, I guess. Together with all our partners, together with all of you that have been here, there will be evaluations coming out, and we hope that all of you will respond to those in a very, very constructive and forward-looking way. So it's been great to see you all here. I can't see you right now, but it's been great to have you all here. Look forward to interact with you a lot in the future as well. So first of all, a big hand for all of you for making this forum a success. I now have a logistic announcement. That is that once this is all over, there's a cocktail reception outside. So now I've said that, remember that. And my last thing to do is to introduce the performance that is going to be the last event on stage. I'm not sure where it's going to happen, I guess around here. And it's a group called Te Mau Aroha. They're from New Zealand, from a place called Aotearoa. So you're very much welcome on stage or wherever you're going to perform. And I will say again, thank you, and until next time.